What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. Today we have our final NHL divisional power ranking video for you here with the Atlantic Division. We've already got the Metro, the Central, and the Pacific out already. So if you haven't checked those out, feel free to go check those out as well. But let's dive right into the Atlantic, shall we?
Yes, sir. This division is an absolute clog. Honestly, any one of these teams, believe it or not, any one of these teams can make the playoffs. But
Except Montreal.
exactly. And that's who we have at 8. Montreal is competitive, but not enough to do anything meaningful this season. They have some additions on depth in guys like Dodonov. Kirby Doc is a huge add. I'm interested to see what he does this season.
Yeah.
But besides that, they're running it back, and I think they're going to develop this core. It's interesting to move out Jeff Petrie and bring in Mike Matheson, who obviously is a downgrade. So when you see moves like that, it does look like they are looking to rebuild, and that blue line definitely needs a revamp because that is awful. And goaltending without Carey Price obviously is going to be tough, and I'm not sure what the future holds for Price, so we'll see how that plays out. But Sean Monahan, when he gets back, I'm interested, along with Kirby Doc, to see what these guys do because I'm looking forward to seeing these guys play healthy and to see where they're at in their full potential. And just closing with Montreal, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Slavkovsky. Do they send him back? Now, this is a grown man, though he's 18, he's 6'4", and I mean, he reminds me a lot of like Austin Matthews. Is you can't take the puck from him. Now the skill and the speed, you're looking for development in that area, but if there's a roster spot available, I would look to see him to take that up because he's just an interesting player, and it'll be great to see what he can do this season. Okay, at 7, we have a huge drop off, or at least we're projecting one. That's with the Boston Bruins, and it's not a matter of talent or even the aging. It's the fact that you're missing Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, and Matt Grzelcyk for an extended period time. That's, I mean, arguably your best forward, without a doubt, not only your best defenseman, but one of the best defensemen in the NHL, and another top 4 defenseman in Matt Grzelcyk. That's huge for a team that's already thinning and aging. And on top of that, you have to count Patrice Bergeron out for at least some point this season. So if and likely when he goes out, this team looks like a rebuilder because there's nothing there really. So, and on top of that, with having to move Taylor Hall up or having to rely more on guys like him and Pasternak, that hurts your depth a whole lot because these aren't necessarily guys that thrive when they're driving the lines. So they still have that Boston depth and that Boston grit, but it's thin. Hampus Lindholm's a great addition, so that to some degree neutralizes the loss of McAvoy, but you're still going to feel it. Swayman and Olmark, I think that's a great tandem, but it's going to be a tough season for Boston considering how good the Atlantic is looking. And it's more of a testament to that than Boston being a bad team.
Yeah.
7 is a tough spot, yes, but the Atlantic's a tough division.
Yeah.
At 6, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and really, I don't see them getting better or worse. I think they're just going to continue to build. I mean, they should get better, but I don't think it'll be anything crazy. I think they're just looking to continue to build. Owen Power will be the big difference maker and kind of the deciding factor to how successful this team is this season. Because besides that, they're running it back, and health will obviously play a big factor into how this season goes for this team. But it was interesting to see what they did last year because they looked very stable for an extended period of time. And I feel like that's manageable to the point where they can carry that momentum into this season. Now, obviously, the young forwards and even the young decor, you do expect progression. Where I feel this team is potentially going to take steps backwards is their tandem in net between Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie. I feel like that's one of the worst tandems in the NHL.
Yeah.
So hopefully they can to some degree rely on Luukkonen, or maybe Anderson has another renaissance season along with Comrie progressing, but that'll be, in my opinion, problematic going forward. So that's an area they need to fix before they start to compete again,
Yeah.
if ever, because it is Buffalo.
Yeah.
Now at 5, this was the toughest decision between these two teams we have stacked. We're going the Ottawa Senators at 5. I feel they had a great offseason, but that blue line has pieces. But I think it's going to take some work to get them to click because it's just it looks like a blue line, and even their forward group defensively, this looks like a team you can run through. It
It
looks like a young Maple Leafs team.
it's inexperienced. I think there's a lot of potential with guys like Brandstrom and Sanderson, and I don't think we've seen the best of Shabbat yet.
Mm-hmm.
And even guys like Artem Zub, these are just young guys, and the veteran experience with Zaitsev and Hamonic. I don't think those are the type of veterans that can really elevate those younger guys' games to where they need to be, to the point where the Ottawa would be a shoo-in for the playoffs. I think in a few years we can look back on this blue line and say, yeah, this was a good blue line, but it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I agree. Brandstrom's the interesting piece on this blue line because if he doesn't work offensively within Ottawa, I'm not sure how well they can use him. And that may be a guy they at some point move on from, especially to give Sanderson more time because
Mhm.
Sanderson's going to be a defenseman that demands playing time.
Yeah.
And their forward group, obviously, you bring in DeBrincat and Giroux, and that's huge. But this top 6, again, it looks thin to me. Or not the top 6, sorry. The bottom 6 is where it starts to thin off for me.
Yeah.
So, of course, that top 6, that's bona fide. I mean, just greatness from all these players you can expect going into next season. But the bottom 6, I don't have the most of confidence. I do like their tandem, though, between Talbot and Forsberg. I think you're going to get a lot of quality starts.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
All right. And at 4, obviously, the team that, in our opinion, we have them beating out Ottawa. That's the Detroit Red Wings. And they don't have the flashy names. Obviously, they don't have guys like DeBrincat and Giroux, but this is a team that's solid. This is a team that's being built in the vision of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So you know what you're going to get when it comes to relying on guys that are solid. Look at that blue line for one. Being led by Moritz Seider, he did not look like a rookie last season.
No.
Right? He's a big man. He can play on both ends, and he's dangerous on both ends. So he's not a guy that is going to be easily stopped. They're building the blue line around him. Ben Sherratt and Ollie Matt are great additions to help fill it out. I'm intrigued because, like Brandstrom, Chronic is a guy that needs to fill out his game, but he has all the potential in the world to do so, to be a second option.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an area where he'll have to develop as Detroit pushes for playoff success. But again, it's a matter of waiting and seeing with him and this team as a whole because they still are young. Edvinson's going to be interesting because how ready is he going into this season? If he's ready, then that's like your Jake Sanderson right there. That's another guy. That's a light version of Seider, really,
Mm-hmm.
because he's good on both ends of the ice and he's big.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to see if he can make the roster this year, which I think he will. It'll be fun to see him play. And if not, they do have depth in guys like Wallman, Pysyk, and Osterley. So they're not stranded there. Now, where I do like Detroit above Ottawa, because even goaltending, it's a soft between Husso and Nedeljkovic. I feel like that's very comparable to Augustusson and Forsberg tandem. But what separates them is their forward depth. Of course, like I said, they don't have the big names, but Bertuzzi, Lark, and Raymond, they can all play quality minutes and they can all play on both ends of the ice. Perron, Kopp, Vrana, same thing. Now you get to guys like Kubalik, Suter, Zadina. These are all guys that at some point can jump into the top 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that fourth line, that's going to be tough to play against. You have Adam Ernie, you have Sundqvist, then you have 6'6" Michael Rasmussen. That's not going to be fun to play against. Then when Robbie Fabry gets back, that's even more depth. So there's a lot of options in Detroit, and I think they're a very stable team. And I think it's time for Detroit to make a playoff push, even Ottawa. It's time for these teams to play some meaningful hockey down the stretch.
I agree. And I think before we move into our third team on the list, or third from the top, that is, um, there really is. This is where I think this division is gapped with there's a top three, and then the other five, I think, are from 4 to 7. I think it's pretty tight. Like Boston, year after year, we have them at 7, but we talk about their downfall every year of, oh, the age is going to catch up to them. And somehow Boston still finds ways to make the playoffs year in and year out. I think this year will be a bit different because I think we really are starting to see the injuries, especially to guys like Marchand. But I think from 4 to 7, when we were planning this video out, I was saying to you before, the gap between 4 and 7 is a lot smaller than the gap between 7 and 8.
Yep.
So I think Montreal is very clearly at the bottom, and 4 to 7, I could see it finishing just about anywhere. Buffalo could overachieve. Ottawa could overachieve. Ottawa could also underachieve. We talked about their offseason, and we're talking about the different things that could be exploited by other teams. I think those could be glaring exploitations there, and they could fall. Just like Detroit could underperform as well. Again, it is a young team. So I think from 4 to 7, feel confident that those will be the teams there. But that's kind of where this division is segmented off. And I think it's the division that you really see how segmented it is, as opposed to the other ones, which are a little more fluid.
Yeah. And in my opinion, Florida, who we have at 3, is in that conversation. I mean, the story for Florida is their departures. Claude Giroux, it's Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
Jonathan Huberdeau, Mason Marchment, Noel Achari, Mackenzie Weegar,
That's huge.
Who at points has to have been their number one defenseman, and Ben Sherratt. And I forgot to say this. Jonathan Huberdeau is arguably was their best forward, along with Barkov. That's huge to move on from 2 of your 4 most important players. Now, I will say this. I do like the move because last year's Florida Panthers were the best Florida Panthers we were going to see. And they didn't do it, and they weren't going to. I didn't think for a moment that Florida was going to make it past the second round, no matter who they played, because they're a high-octane offensive team last year. They couldn't play on both ends of the ice, and that's how you lose in the playoffs. And we've been talking about it with Toronto for years, is do they need to blow up the big 4? Well, Florida did it because they're not going to spin their tires. And I'm not saying whether or not Toronto should, but Florida did it. They bring in Matthew Tkachuk. I don't think they're going to be competitive next season, but when you consider Florida in the future, I think this is the move they needed to make.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a tough move for Florida fans to swallow, seeing how much that they gave up for Tkachuk. But I think the age difference is huge, and I think the potential for Tkachuk is huge. He's got such a high ceiling, and he does so much. His physicality, his scoring wise, his two-way game. I think Tkachuk is a all-around guy that will only get better, whereas Huberdeau's hit his peak. Barkov has hit his peak. So it's come to the point now where you need to try to add guys to minimize the time it's going to take for the decline to happen with a guy like Barkov.
Yep.
You put guys, or you give Barkov guys to surround him, and his game will only stabilize and continue to be the elite game it is right now.
And that's exactly right, because you look at what Florida does is they find guys to put around their players. So bringing in Tkachuk, I trust that though they may not have big names, Colin White's a guy that is looking to revitalize his game. If that doesn't work, you have Hornquist. Rudolph Balcers isn't terrible, especially if he can fit in. He has the talent to move up into a top 6 if you need him. And that's without mentioning Anton Lundell, who at some point will be a premier forward for this team. So they have options. They have different looks. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Matthew Tkachuk, because now he's in a position to run his own line, because I don't see him and Barkov playing together 5-on-5 often. I think it'll be like a Jonathan Taves, Patty Kane, where they split them up unless they need to get some work done, but it'll be interesting to see. And I trust Florida's management to take care of that. Defensively, though, losing Uyghur, that's the big one for me, is because they didn't bring anything to replace him. Yes, you lose Huberdeau, but you bring in Kachuk. On the blue line, they're a lot thinner now, especially if Ekblad goes out, which he seems to every season. So that's where they're going to run into some issues. Now, Forsling can step in on the power play, and maybe they can get some guys to step in on the penalty kill to help neutralize a potential Ekblad loss, but it's definitely going to hurt them. I do like their tandem, though. Bobrovsky and the rich man Spencer Knight. It's $14 million once that Knight contract kicks in, but that's going to be a solid transition, I think, from Bobrovsky probably moving towards a backup role and Spencer Knight moving towards a starting role.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a tandem, especially having a guy like Knight that extends Bobrovsky's career, because now Bobrovsky doesn't really have to play more than 50 games.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do in net, but I think that's one of the more stable tandems. If not, they could be a elite if they both play at to their potential.
Yep.
At 2, this is a tough one because I feel like Toronto, who we have at 2, is just a dynamite team, especially in the regular season.
Yeah.
But this is one of those years where they went through a lot of changes and they just have been hit with the injury bug before the season starts. And this is before we can expect a Matthews injury, which seems to happen quite often.
Yeah.
So that's already an issue. And they're looking thin to start the season. Of course, Tavares is going to come back, but Engvall and Gaudette won't do much if and when they come back. I don't see much help there. Liljegren even, I don't see much help from the guys that they're expecting to come back. This is a season where I expect the magic of Kyle Dubas to kick in when you consider the additions of guys like Jarn Krok, Obey Kubel. I think those are quality picks. Those are guys that can play quality minutes top to bottom, and that helps fill out your depth. And at what point are we going to see an elite season from Nick Robertson? Because it's got to be there. He may not be as good as his brother, but the talent is there. Defensively, it's interesting. Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, TJ Brody, Justin Hall. It's interesting. They're running it back. Mark Giordano's good. I mean, the story of the offseason, though, is what is Toronto doing in net? And I don't hate the tandem of Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. Like, what do you think of that?
I'm not a fan because I really do think that they're banking on, especially with Dubas, he's banking on the Murray that he knew when he was with the Sioux. And then he's banking on the Murray that, somehow has 2 cups. And I think he's far removed from both of those things. He's far removed from when he last worked with Dubas. He's far removed from those Pittsburgh glory days. And I don't feel confident in the backup in Samsonov. I feel a lot more confident than, putting out a guy like Shalgren again. I think they do have a guy that they have 2 guys that have starting potential, which is, I think, is important when you lose a guy like Campbell. They were never going to replace Jack Campbell. That was going to be tough to do this offseason.
Not unless they got Darcy Kemper.
Yeah. To which I would still probably give the edge to Campbell in terms of skill wise to Kemper. But I just think that it's a lot of, well, if he does this and if he does that. And to be entirely honest, more often than not, ifs don't get you cups, ifs don't get you playoff series wins. And that's really what the Leafs are looking for right now. I just don't think it moves the needle when they desperately need to move the needle.
Here's the way I look at it. Matt Murray's on a 2-year contract. Okay, that's fine. He's getting paid like $4 or $5 million by Toronto. I think Samsonov on that 1 year is going to play his tail off to get a real contract. And
that's true.
He started for Washington in the playoffs, and Washington gave the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers some trouble.
Yeah, that's fair.
Washington really shouldn't have. So I think Samsonov's going to have a great season. As for Murray, this is where it's boom or bust. Because, of course, he won 2 cups, and he won those cups. Like, let's not forget, he outplayed Hall of Fame Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
Is he still that guy? Well, he has the chance to prove it. Will he? Will he not? I can't say. But they have two options that, yeah, they look shaky. But I don't think it's out of the world of possibilities of them to do something great this season in net. And I think they're both gonna, at least Samsonov, I don't have much doubt that he'll prove himself to be a legitimate starter. Matt Murray, I'm iffy about because of health and just the past, but I think they'll be okay in net.
I just the fact that Matt Murray is not too far removed from, being demoted to the Belleville Senators, that I worry a little bit, but that's besides the point.
Well, at one, you don't have to worry about this team's goalie being demoted to the Belleville Senators. It's Tampa Bay, led by Andre Vasilevsky. This team's just filthy. They still got it. McDonough is a huge loss, but this blue line still got it. I think they're banking on a huge progression from Mikhail Sergachev, because if not, that $8 million extension looks rough. But defensively, they still have, I think, a legit top four, especially if Cal Foot can add a little more to his game. You have Hedman, you have Foot, you have Sergachev, you have Cernak. That's pretty nice. Cole and Fleet Myers can eat up some quality minutes.
Yep.
Their forward core, though, that's still pretty good. You have Point Kucherov, and they're going to be looking for their left wing. And I think we can agree Nemesnikov may be the guy that can fill in that hole.
And I think Nemesnikov, depending on when Sorelli gets back, I if Nemesnikov performs there, I don't know if they break up that line or if they try to make something work to keep that top line, because I think Nemesnikov, he knows Tampa's system. He's been there before. And it was a move that on the surface it doesn't look like a huge move, a depth move, but Nemesnikov can play a huge role in a Tampa team that's so offensively driven and driven by their top six, their top nine. And I think he plays a huge role in that, especially with injuries. Injuries is going to be a huge topic of conversation for Tampa Bay, because they've been to 3 straight cup finals.
Yeah.
And I think when you play that much hockey in such a short period of time, I think eventually it'll catch up to you. It hasn't caught up to them yet a whole lot. I mean, they've had injuries to Kucherov, they've had injuries to Stamkos, but more often than not, they've been able to overcome those. But these are also guys that have been injured, but are still playing a lot of hockey. So I think this is probably the year that we do see injuries play a bigger role than they already have with Tampa. And I think guys like Nemesnikov will be huge.
Definitely. And I look at if this team is healthy, I would look to move Colton to the right wing on that third line, Paul to the left wing, put Cirelli right there. And then you
Yeah,
have a top nine that can all score. That
100%.
that's
That's a scary top nine.
that's pretty scary, but it's a matter of them being healthy, and that's where it's going to be tough for Tampa.
Yeah.
We almost dropped them to second, but this team's just too good.
So with that, that'll do it for our Atlantic Division season preview. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like the video, give it a like down below. Subscribe so you don't miss any of our other uploads. Comment down below what you think of our power rankings here, who we have too high, who we have too low. Bruins fans, we definitely want to hear from you. I know the Bruins at 7 might be a little low. What are your thoughts in the comments there? Let us know below. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.
Peace. All right.